There are two types of people in this world. Those who know they can fit a tablespoon of peanut butter in their mouth, and those who have tried and failed. Skinny, slightly neurotic, and obsessed with health advice, he barely understood. 12 scoops of protein. No pain, no gain, baby. That was all the convincing Jerry needed. Looking at the empty blender bottle in his hand, Jerry realized he hadn't felt this good about himself since he drank 3 cans of Diet Coke before high school to get rid of his hiccup. And it worked. Eventually, the gym staff noticed him and asked what he was drinking. Jerry was happy to tell them. He liked being the center of attention, especially when it was for something so healthy. So he sat down in front of the mirror and drank the rest of his shake without even trying to hide it. Within minutes, his stomach felt like it was trying to tear itself apart from the inside. Pain radiated throughout his body. Jerry collapsed on the gym floor, sobbing uncontrollably. They were the question. He wasn't getting fatter because he was drinking too much protein. He was getting fatter because he was drinking a ridiculous amount of protein. How much is too much protein? I can't tell you. Jerry Whitman can't tell you. All we know is that 12 scoops isn't enough. But 13 is probably too much. But even in his misery, he knew this was a good kind of pain. The kind that makes you suffer, but only because your body is being pushed to its limit and beyond. This was what it meant to be dedicated. This was what it meant to be strong. But no matter how many times he mentioned protein, they all laughed and told him to cut it out. Protein shakes weren't his thing. He hated the way they made him feel. He hated the way they smelled. He hated how loud they made his stomach. He bought skin cream, hoping it would smooth out his distended veins. He went on a hot dog diet, which he learned would shrink his muscles and help him lose weight. He walked barefoot through the mall, believing the smooth, flat soles would massage his feet and somehow fix everything. None of these things worked. In fact, Jerry's body seemed determined to stay jacked, regardless of how much protein he drank or stopped drinking. His veins stayed prominent, his muscles stayed bulky, and his stomach remained uncomfortably full of air. But mostly he hated how they made him look. Now that he'd finished the last scoop, Jerry stared at himself in the gym's tiny, poorly lit bathroom mirror and noticed something disturbing. His veins were showing. At first he was proud, but then he realized he was looking at his veins because his skin had stretched over his bulging muscles, distorting his reflection and turning him into what could charitably be described as a human waffle iron. Jerry screamed and ran out of the bathroom before anyone could see him. They said he shouldn't drink more than 3 scoops at once, and Jerry would smile politely and say, "You guys are so cute when you try to tell me how to live my life." This went on for months. Jerry kept drinking his giant protein shake before each workout, refusing to reduce the number of scoops, sticking to his routine like an iron-fueled glue. Was this what it felt like to be an athlete? A winner? A monster? What would happen if he did this every day? Not because he got bored of the taste or tired of making it. His stomach simply couldn't handle it. After about 8 scoops, his body would start rejecting the remaining 4, producing a series of violent burps that sounded like a walrus gargling with gravel. Jerry was devastated, but also surprised. Had he done it? Had he grown his stomach so much that 12 scoops of protein was no longer enough? He started experimenting, upping his daily intake to 15 scoops, then 20. And each time he did, his body would revolt, sending unwanted protein back up his esophagus and out of his mouth. It was the most disgusted Jerry had ever been by something that came out of his body, except for the time he ate a bad burrito. If he turned his nutrition plan into a pickup truck and drove it through the food groups, what kind of carnage would ensue? Would his insides turn to steel wool? Could he grow so much muscle he'd need a new body to contain it? What if that body was hotter? These questions burned in his mind as he stared at the gym's squat rack, not because he wanted to use it, but because he needed to anchor himself to reality. Maybe doing 12 scoops of protein wasn't a realistic long-term solution. Maybe he should find a hobby or career or wife, something that wouldn't make his stomach feel like it was housing a small animal shelter. But Jerry decided against it. Why listen to reason when his gut was already giving him the 6-pack he'd always wanted? The next morning, Jerry marched into my Soul Forge gym with a blender bottle the size of a flower vase. He didn't work out, he prepared. In the locker room, he emptied an entire tub of protein powder into the bottle, added almond milk, half a banana, 3 ice cubes, and shook it violently like a mad scientist. It looked like cement. It smelled like chalky regret. But Jerry, driven by visions of overnight biceps, gulped the whole thing down in 5 minutes. Dozen scoops. Dozen. Jerry Whitman just drank a dozen scoops of protein. Jerry had recently become consumed by a single goal: bulk up fast. He wanted muscles, veins, protein shaker, clout. He wanted people to ask him for workout tips, not directions to the chess club. But Jerry's problem wasn't lack of knowledge. It was lack of action, or more specifically, lack of stomach capacity. Jerry could down a gallon of orange juice in one sitting, but 6 egg whites were his kryptonite. Watching other people lift weights made him feel 2 ways: impressed and nauseated. But Jerry was done feeling bad about his soft little arms. He was tired of seeing the same arm and leg hairs when he showered. He wanted variety. He wanted change. He wanted to get swole. And then there's me. I'm both of those things. I am a rider. I'm here to tell you about a man named Jerry Whitman. Jerry Whitman is a rider too, which is weird because I'm Jerry Whitman. He lives in a town called... That's also strange because Fitnessville isn't real. I created it because I thought it would be funny to write a story about a man who drank a gallon of protein shake and what happened next. So sit back, relax, get ready to learn nothing. Jerry Whitman was the kind of guy who read every fitness blog but never lifted anything heavier than a frozen burrito. One night, while binge-watching gym transformation reels on social media, he came across a video of a jacked influencer who said, "I don't eat breakfast, I drink it." At first, nothing happened. He felt a little sick, but mostly powerful, like he had just urinated in his own mouth. He hit the gym 4 days a week, bringing his absurdly large shaker bottle with him each time. And then one day, something incredible happened. Jerry couldn't finish his shake anymore. But Jerry wasn't done. He still had more protein left in his tub, and he was determined to use every last scoop. A few hours later, after spending more time on the toilet than he cared to admit, Jerry realized he might have made a mistake. In the weeks that followed, Jerry tried to undo what he'd done. And that's when Jerry had a realization. Protein shakes weren't the answer. Now go do something nice for someone today. Go on. Do it. You know you want to. Jerry's transformation was going to be epic. He could feel it. He would start with a warm-up, of course, but he didn't need the usual 5 minutes of light cardio. No, sir. Jerry was feeling ambitious. He was going to warm up with a Zumba class. Get the blood flowing, he muttered to himself, even though his blood was clearly trying to escape his body. The Zumba room was a pulsing chaos of loud music, hip swivels, and middle-aged women in neon leggings who moved like their joints were made of rubber bands. Jerry wasn't a fan of the commercial brands, so he formulated his own line, selling them in bulk to clients. They worked, mostly because they were loaded with caffeine and creatine monohydrate. Everyone on the street seemed to be staring at him. Were they discussing his strange appearance? Had word of his Zumba breakdown spread? Jerry couldn't tell. His vision blurred again. This time, when it cleared, he found himself sprawled on the sidewalk. As he jogged through the park, he saw kids playing, couples walking, dogs chasing frisbees. Life was happening all around him, and he was part of it again. He wasn't above it. He wasn't hiding from it. He was living it. When he returned home, he called his clients, one by one, apologizing for the misinformation, the false promises, the shortcuts he'd pushed them to take. Some were angry. Some were disappointed. But most were understanding. Jerry knew he'd lost their trust, and it was going to take a long time to rebuild. But he was committed. He was done with the quick fixes, the miracle cures, the false hope. He was done with being a fraud. He was done being Jerry the Guru. From that day forward, Jerry was known as Jerry the Trainer, a man who made mistakes, A man who was trying to do the right thing. A man who understood that true transformation wasn't about a pill or a potion, but about showing up and doing the work. A group of businessmen in suits hurried around him, talking into their phones. Dispatch, send an ambulance to 3rd and Main. Yeah, we got a situation here. Jerry heard one of them say he wanted to protest, to tell them he was fine, but no words came out. All he could do was watch as they loaded him onto a stretcher and disappeared inside an ambulance. The ingredients list looked more like a chemistry set than food, but those products were for amateurs. Jerry had his own secret stash, experimental concoctions brewed in a cauldron of scientific curiosity and desperation. That night, lying in bed with his stomach sounding like a dying whale, Jerry questioned everything. The protein, the influencers, his idea that transformation could come in a scoop. He remembered the red liquid he'd drunk earlier, the testosterone. Was this what it did? But he'd taken it before, during competitions. Sure, it made him feel invincible, pumped up, ready to bench double his body weight. But this wasn't a competition. This was real life. I didn't realize. You pay for every excess, he groaned, turning over. Where was Emily? He needed to talk to her, but it was too late. She was asleep. Sleep? That was the answer. Jerry just needed some sleep, so he got up, walked to the window, and watched the sunrise. With each passing moment, his vision cleared, his headache eased, and his body began to hum with energy. The crazy thing was, he didn't need any of it, he thought, looking at the vials on his desk. They were nothing but expensive pee. Jerry was done playing God. He was done pretending that a pill or powder could replace hard work and dedication. Transformation wasn't about shortcuts or magic potions. It was about the sweat, the pain, the discipline. It was about showing up every day and putting in the effort. He was reminded of something his old coach used to tell him. You don't rise by lifting yourself up. You rise by lifting others up. Jerry realized he'd lost sight of that. Instead of pushing his clients to be their best, he'd tried to be the best. And in doing so, he'd forgotten what it meant to be human. They were stronger, riskier, more potent. And he had a hunch that whatever was in his system needed some serious firepower to counteract it. There were dozens of women in there, and Jerry, one guy who just wanted to get rich. Next, the red liquid, pure testosterone, legally obtained, of course, from an overseas supplier. He followed it up with a scoop of Noya, his not yet perfected fat burner, then washed it down with gallons of water. Jerry felt a surge of energy, the kind that made your veins sing and your muscles tingle. He did a few curls, but his hands were shaking. He needed to focus, so he poured another gallon of water, chased it with the contents of a yellow vial, and waited for the burn. It never came. What the hell? Jerry wasn't used to being stumped. He checked the ingredients list again, measured out another serving, and drank it straight. Still, nothing. He tried mixing it with orange juice, Gatorade, even milk. Nothing helped. The product simply refused to curdle. Jerry stared at it in disbelief. It looked like a thick, creamy soup. Suddenly, an idea struck him like a bolt of lightning. Maybe it needed a catalyst, something to trigger the reaction. He roamed family-sized bag of sour cream from the fridge, dumped it in, gave it a stir, and waited. Nothing. Okay, let's try the ultimate test. Jerry scooped a generous helping of Chunky Monkey ice cream into a bowl, poured the drink on top, and stirred it all together. Then he ate it. The ice cream instantly turned hard as steel in his mouth. Jerry spit it out, grabbed the sink faucet, and stuck his head under it. Cold water cascading over his face brought him back to reality. He had to get out of there. He felt like an extra in a Jane Fonda music video. Jerry joined in, stiff as a stop sign, waving his arms in awkward, panicked bursts. He smiled nervously. His stomach began to rebel. The room shimmered. His heart pounded like a conga drum. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but it was too much. His vision blurred around the edges. This was supposed to be a warm-up. What had he been thinking? But then something unexpected happened. Jerry blacked out. When Jerry awoke, He was lying on a cold, hard floor surrounded by concerned faces. The instructor crouched beside him. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "Yeah," Jerry croaked, pushing himself up on shaky legs. His head swam. Everything seemed distorted, like the world had been funhouse mirror. Jerry stumbled back, bumping into a woman in hot pink yoga pants. She steadied him with a hand on his arm. Her touch sent a jolt through him. Was she checking him out? Had she seen what had happened? Before he could dwell on it more, Jerry excused himself to the bathroom. Staring at his reflection, he saw a ghost. His face was drained of color, his eyes wide and unfocused. He splashed cold water on his face, willing himself to be okay. It wasn't working! Maybe he should have gone straight to the weights after all. But no! He had wanted to push himself, prove to himself that he was capable of more than grunting and curling in a dark gym. And look at him now. Humiliated, pathetic, possibly His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Coach Williams checking in. Jerry lied, claiming a minor spill. Nothing serious. How could he admit this kind of defeat? He was a personal trainer, a mentor to many, a beacon of health and fitness in his small town. Well, maybe not that last part, but still, he couldn't call for help. What would people think? They'd say, didn't that guy just invent some new supplement or diet shake? That's Jerry, the fake guru. Shame burned in his chest, hot and suffocating. He forced himself to take a deep breath, calm him down, steady himself. All right, he muttered to himself. Time to get to the bottom of this. And by the bottom, he meant the basement of his gym, where he kept the good stuff, the protein powders, supplements, fat burners, pre-workouts, energy boosters. He started with the green vial, a homemade blend of amino acids and adaptogens he'd been working on for months. As he stumbled out of the gym, the morning sun felt like a branding iron on his skin. The EMTs were not impressed. Afterfluids, a stern warning, and a small lecture about the dangers of overconsumption. Jerry was discharged. That morning, Jerry went for a run. It wasn't fast, it wasn't far, but it was enough. We all have our own little quirks. I talk to myself. Some people bite their nails. Others can't stop chewing their lips. And then there's Jerry, who has this habit of accidentally roundhouse kicking people in the face during Zumba class. But that particular incident happened because of Jerry's quest for bigger biceps. That's why he went from looking like this to this in a matter of months. But before we get into what happened to Jerry, first we need to understand what happens when you pump your muscles. He did this by taking supplements like creatine and protein powder and eating food with high protein content like chicken, eggs, fish, and of course, protein bars. But despite Jerry's best efforts, his body wasn't growing like he wanted it to. In fact, he looked worse than before. And that's because he was making 3 very common mistakes. When you do strength training, tiny tears form in your muscle fibers. Experts recommend getting between 10 and 35 grams of protein per meal. She taught Jerry how to lift properly, how to fuel himself like a human and not a science experiment, and most importantly, how to listen to his body. She explained the concept of progressive overload, which simply means gradually increasing the stress on your muscles over time. He had energy in the morning. He stopped stalking muscle forums and started journaling. Real progress measured, thoughtful, earned. He even made friends, real ones. Rome wasn't built in a day, nor were your muscle mass or your strength. Be patient with yourself and enjoy the journey. Second, always consult with a healthcare professional or a certified trainer before starting any new workout routine or supplement regimen. What works for one person might not work for another. Your body is unique, so treat it as such. And third, don't fall for the quick fix. There is no magic pill or one scoop of protein that will transform your body overnight. Focus on making small changes to your lifestyle that you can sustain over time. Remember, consistency is the key to success. And the protein, one scoop post-workout, banana optional. This is key to muscle growth, but it needs to be done slowly and steadily. Rosa also educated Jerry on the importance of rest and recovery. She stressed that muscle growth doesn't happen in the gym. It happens while Jerry's body is resting and repairing itself. Taking more than this won't help you build muscle. Rosa advised Jerry to cut down on protein powder and focus on whole food sources of protein like lean meats, beans, and lentils. She also taught him about portion control, explaining that just because something is healthy doesn't mean he could eat unlimited amounts of it. Jerry was having 12 scoops of protein powder every day. To give you an idea of just how excessive this is, the daily recommended intake of protein for a sedentary man is 56 grams. He was more confident, happier, and healthier than he'd ever been. He understood that achieving his fitness goals wasn't about quick fixes or extreme measures. It was about making small, sustainable changes to his lifestyle. For someone who's active, it's 73 grams. Many people want to get fit fast, and they take shortcuts like taking too many supplements or eating too much protein or lifting weights that are too heavy for them. These shortcuts may seem like a good idea at the time, but they often lead to injuries and setbacks. He tore a muscle in his shoulder while trying to lift too much weight. On top of that, lifting super heavy weights makes your body release cortisol and adrenaline, which can shut down muscle protein synthesis. Your body rushes nutrients and oxygen to those tears to fix the damage. You need to give your body enough rest to heal and rebuild muscle fibers after a workout. Jerry didn't do that. He worked out every day without giving his body a break, which led to burnout and injuries. These exercises helped him stay active without putting extra stress on his muscles. He wanted to increase his arm size so badly that he ended up injuring himself. That humiliation stuck with him, leaving him ashamed and embarrassed. Think of this like an on switch that tells your body it's time to build muscle. The trick to building muscle is to turn that switch on and keep it on longer than you turn it off. Turning it on is easy. Just do some weightlifting. But keeping it on longer is a little more complicated. You need to eat enough protein, stay hydrated, and get plenty of rest. If you do these things correctly, that switch stays on longer, leading to more muscle growth. But if you mess up, that switch turns off faster than expected, and you might end up with a bunch of extra body fat. But here's the thing about Jerry: he didn't quit. Embarrassed? Yes. Humiliated? Definitely. But underneath all that mortification was a spark. He returned to the gym the next week, head low, protein scoop capped at 1, and asked a trainer for help. Her name was Rosa, a former college athlete with biceps like braided rope and the patience of a saint. She looked Jerry up and down. recognized him instantly as the MMA Zumba guy, and smirked. "Rule number 1, she said. "We don't fight grandmas in cardio class." Jerry turned bright red. "Rule number 2, she continued. "You don't need 12 scoops of anything except common sense." Jerry nodded vigorously, eyes fixed on his feet. So began Jerry's crash course in unpumping his own muscles. At first glance, you might think that pumping your muscles is a bad thing. But in Jerry's case, it was dangerously unhealthy. Muscle protein synthesis is controlled by anabolic signaling. Now remember, Jerry? Well, he tried to cheat the system, force that switch to stay on longer by any means necessary. The first mistake Jerry made was taking too much protein. Second, Jerry wasn't working out correctly. And finally, Jerry wasn't giving his body enough time to recover. Building muscle takes time. One afternoon, as Jerry finished his set of squats, he looked around the gym. It buzzed with life. Newbies, veterans, cardio bunnies, powerlifters, everyone chasing their own version of better. "Nice depth today," she said. Jerry beamed. Later that day, he passed by the Zumba room. And if he says 12, tell him about Jerry. Tell him to breathe, laugh, and just start with one. Music played, hips shook, and someone knew another scrawny guy with nervous eyes stood by the door. You see, Jerry had been so engrossed in seeking external validation, in chasing the elusive like-in comment, that he had neglected the most critical voice of all. His own. He had failed to listen to his body's cues, its limits, its language. In the crowded gym, amidst the clanging weights and grunts of effort, Jerry had somehow tuned out the whispers that could have guided him. We bombard the internet with questions and opinions. What supplements are best? Why is cardio necessary? How many times a week should I train? He was sacrificing the purity of his workouts, the joy of movement, the thrill of progress, all in the name of a perfect formula. Similarly, if all you know is protein powder, everything seems solvable with a bigger scoop. But life, much like fitness, is multi-dimensional. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one might not work for another. His obsession with protein was turning his love for fitness into a science experiment. But the irony was that his very obsession was slowing him down. It was derailing his workouts, disrupting his life, and most importantly, blinding him to the obvious. A well-timed rest, a wholesome meal, or a mindful workout. Our tendency to complicate matters, to seek extremes, and to overlook the obvious. Subscribe to our channel and ring that bell so you don't miss more funny, motivational stories just like this. Because sometimes the best gains come in small steps and a good sense of humor. But it was also a reminder of our capacity for growth, for learning, and most importantly, for adapting. These aren't the sexiest topics, but they are the cornerstones of real progress. And like all unscientific endeavors, it lacked control groups, random variables, and most importantly, from social media gurus to late night in. While he loved the camaraderie of group fitness classes, there were certain classes he dreaded, particularly yoga. He didn't discover a magical protein shake, but he did uncover something far more valuable, a deep connection with his body and a respect for its inherent wisdom. In doing so, he transformed from a frustrated gym goer into a dedicated athlete, from a panicked protein purist into a balanced fitness enthusiast. He struggled with the stillness, the focus on breath over brute strength, He realized that his protein pursuit had become a distraction, a mirage in the desert of his ambitions. It was time to simplify, to refocus, and most importantly, to listen. He could understand why a workout felt incomplete without the release of a killer squat or the satisfying clink of weights hitting the floor. Whole foods, clean workouts, and a renewed sense of purpose. He rediscovered the joy in a simple protein shake made with whole milk instead of water. The satisfaction of a well-executed exercise without the distraction of tracking every gram. He began to tune into his body's language, understanding when it needed rest, when it craved nourishment, and when it was ready to push beyond its perceived limits. But true growth, be it in fitness, relationships, or career, rarely follows such simplistic paths. Jerry's journey began like many others, scrolling through an endless feed of sculpted physiques and miracle transformations, each post promising the fastest path to paradise, the secret formula to success. But this wasn't just a post-workout ritual. This was different. This was an exploration, an experiment, a descent into what he would later term as protein panic. He meticulously measured out each scoop, not just counting calories and protein, but calculating the exact ratio of casein to whey. He tracked every gram of sugar, every milligram of flavoring. He became obsessed with the idea that somewhere in this powder lay the secret to his transformation. He saved those posts, those tips, those tricks, but his methods were increasingly chaotic. He was convinced that the key to his success was locked in the right combination of supplements. One day, he added too much protein. Another day, not enough carbs. Sometimes he mixed in creatine. Other times, he experimented with branched-chain amino acids. Each change meticulously recorded in his ever-growing notebook. He followed influencers, trainers, nutritionists, everyone who seemed to have cracked the code. And yet, despite the daily efforts, Jerry found himself stuck in a cycle of stagnation. Frustration grew. Doubts crept in. Was he doomed to be the perpetual gym rat, spending countless hours and still falling short of his goal? The answer, as it often does, lay not in the countless articles or Instagram posts he had consumed, but in the quiet, unfiltered feedback from his own body. But how often do we stop, listen, and truly understand before rushing to share the latest scoop? Jerry walked over, gently clapped him on the shoulder, and said, "Just dance, man, don't kick anyone." They both laughed. He wiped sweat from his forehead and smiled. No hallucinations. No delusions, just effort. Honest, clumsy, sweaty effort. What he did become was stronger, wiser, and surprisingly funny. He shared his protein shake horror story often at parties, at the gym, even in a blog post titled "From Shake to Wake, My Journey from Protein Panic to Progress." It got a few thousand views. Someone even offered to animate it. And through it all, Jerry held on to the lesson he had to literally hallucinate to learn. Growth doesn't come in shortcuts, scoops, or viral advice. It comes in humble steps, honest mistakes, and the courage to try again. Rosa walked by and fist bumped. Jerry never became a bodybuilder. That was never really the point. So the next time you see a skinny guy clutching a protein shaker like it's Excalibur, maybe ask him how many scoops he's planning to use. They say everyone has two ears and one mouth for a reason. Yet we seem to do a lot more talking than listening. Fitness advice is everywhere, but valuable lessons are hidden between the protein shakes and pre-workouts. It wasn't a revelation that hit him like a bolt from the blue. It was more like the gradual dawning of a new perspective. This is a story that resonates with many. We live in an age where external success is often celebrated and internal truths are sidelined. The gym had been Jerry's sanctuary, his battleground, his classroom. And like any student, he had his favorite subjects and least favorite exercises. One evening after a particularly grueling leg day, Jerry found himself drawn to the familiar comfort of protein powder. As weeks turned into months, Jerry's gym bag became a mobile laboratory. Beakers! Jerry! What? Jerry's dedication was admirable, but amidst the chaos of his concoctions, Jerry overlooked something crucial. There's a saying that goes, If your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. In Jerry's case, his protein obsession stemmed from a desire for quick results, a longing for that magic bullet that could accelerate his progress. The turning point came, as it often does, when Jerry stepped back and reevaluated his priorities. He started small, cutting out the fancy supplements, the custom protein blends, and going back to basics. This is the crux of Jerry's transformation. Remember, the greatest transformations often begin with the simplest adjustments. Jerry's protein panic wasn't just a comical episode in his fitness journey. It was a testament to our human nature. If Jerry's wild ride from protein panic to personal growth gave you a laugh, a little inspiration, or reminded you not to trust every fitness influencer you see online, give this video a thumbs up.